Oh, I see. Let me try that.
Yeah, if that works, it's okay. Otherwise, we'll go as
I've just made you a co-host. Let's give that a try. Yay!
Yes. Okay. Yay. Okay. So I'm just gonna minimize this. All right. So it's 8:02 right now over here in GMT +5. We have good number of participants who have already joined in. Let's give it 30 seconds more and then we can begin.
Sounds great. And I want to say hi to Ellen Markle. Hi, Ellen. Good morning. Welcome. I know you can't be on audio, but it's great to have you here.
Yeah, I see my colleague Fahad Khan. I think he's the one I know. So great to have you on this session, Fahad. Thank you for making time.
And I also want to welcome David Vergara from Chicago. So welcome, David.
So I think let's just begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are really excited to have you with us today for this information-packed session on self-service synthetic test data. I'm just gonna pull up this housekeeping slide for 15-20 seconds for all of you to just have a look at it and appreciate if you could follow these requests during the webinar. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna start by introducing ourselves and the organizations that we belong to. So Kualitatem is a global audit, assurance and consultancy company specializing in software quality assurance and information security services. Our services are geared towards providing our clients' products, infrastructure, and digital transformation initiatives to run successfully, defect-free, and to make sure that they are secure. Kualitatem was ranked twice by Gartner as a pure play testing company in the same industry all over the globe with dedication, which is reflective of its success. Kualitatem was founded by Jamil Gohir and Khurram Mir back in 2009, and we stand prominent as a symbol of quality in the market today. Our technology partner, GenRocket, is an emerging technology leader in software testing technology, service IT, serving IT services companies and enterprise customers who demand superior quality and efficiency in their software development operations. GenRocket is the next generation of test data management solutions that uses a synthetic test data generation system that allows users to generate test data on demand and in real time. This system was built for enterprise use cases and can scale to large, complex database environments while preserving referential integrity. Let's meet our speakers. I'll start with myself. I'm Uzma Yassin. I'm currently heading partnerships and business development department and team at Kualitatem. In my 19 years of experience, I've had the opportunity to work in various industries, including software, construction, and silicon. I've primarily worked towards providing solutions for software quality assurance and testing industry, and providing and defining and implementing business strategy, running service delivery, project management, business development, and client relationship management. I am accompanied by Garth Rose, who is the co-founder and CEO of GenRocket. Garth is a technology enthusiast and an expert at launching and building technology startups. He has had 30 years of experience working in leadership roles including President and CEO of Concentric Vision, VP Sales and VP Business Development at Indus River Networks, VP Sales and Marketing at Digital Products, and National Sales Manager at Leading Edge Products. Our next co-speaker at this webinar is Heisel Taylor. Heisel is also co-founder and chief architect of GenRocket and is passionate about computers, software, and complex data. Heisel has around 25 years of experience as principal software engineer, chief architect, and technology consultant in numerous venture-backed startup software companies, including Cartera Commerce, Upromise, and GoToMedia. Hi, Heisel. Hi, Garth.
Hey.
Good morning, good evening.
Yes, yeah, I think all our participants are from different time zones. It's night over here, it's very early morning over there. So really exciting. So there's this quote by John Ruskin that I personally like very much. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of intelligent effort. I find this relevant to whatever I do, whether it is my work, personal well-being, or, well, the way of life. And if you look at the cost of poor quality, which has been reported by the cost of poor software quality in US, a 2020 report, it was more than 2 trillion last year. And the reason for that, amongst the top reasons, were cybersecurity failures, unsuccessful IT projects, legacy systems, and their fragility. So organizations are failing to fully test their code prior to production release. And there's this another report that I was studying, which mentioned that around in 2019, the State of Database DevOps cited that 65% of organizations still use production data in testing, 36% mask it, and 30% subset before provisioning it to test environments. Meanwhile, only 18% synthesize data using automated techniques. Now, we know by being part of this industry for so many years that the world of quality assurance, most specifically software quality assurance, has seen a lot of advancement in last 2 to 3 decades, indicating that its importance as an integral part of any product success has only increased. However, one area that has remained largely the same are the tools and techniques being used to provision test data. So, I mean, what is test data used for and why is it so critical? So let me just briefly identify 2 to 3 items where I feel that it becomes really critical to have quality and the amount of test data required to make it a success. So data variety, it is needed for your test coverage. Data volume, which is a prerequisite and core requirement for any system's performance. And data velocity for any successful continuous delivery process implementation. So if you look at the traditional test data provisioning stats shared by the World Quality Report in 2020, so you can see that a lot of organizations are still using conventional test data generation and management methods, including generating data manually, using production data. And the same report reported that over 50% of QA professionals have reported challenges with test data. Testers spend 30 to 60% of their time provisioning test data. And more organizations have automated less than 20% of their testing. Now, while traditional way of generating test data have been proving providing some support, but they're definitely not enough anymore. Why? Because they're labor intense, provide only limited data, and are two-dimensional. And when it comes to the production testing, the situation becomes more grave because the time it's required to provision data for production testing, the variety, the permutation and combinations that are available for testing, and the cost of ownership, it's way too high. And the impact on agile teams and all the initiative that organizations are taking to actually improve the efficiency and success of their product development life cycles is actually going down and not up. At this point, I would invite my co-speaker, Garth, to emphasize and show us how synthetic test data has pretty much eliminated this challenge in the industry and how their solution, GenRocket, is cost effective and delivers quality at speed. So over to you, Garth.
All right, Uzma, thank you so much. I'm going to just shift over and keep going here. So thank you for that lovely introduction. And I'm sharing my screen. Are you able to see the emergence of synthetic data? Is that on the screen?
Yes, I can see that.
Wonderful. So we all heard Uzma describing this, and those of you on the call, you're either curious about synthetic data or you're aware of some of the challenges of using spreadsheets, of using production data. While production data can meet some of those requirements, of course, there are gaps. So when Uzma talks about variety of data, as you can see on the screen, it's because you can get the positive data, the happy path, but how do you come up with the negative data if it doesn't sit in production? Of course, it shouldn't be sitting in production. How do you do all the permutations and combinations? How do you create transactional data or data feed data? If you're in healthcare, X12 EDI, or message data like Kafka messages or Swift messages if you're in banking, so or dynamic and so forth. So the beauty of synthetic data is that you can design it quickly and you can solve any test data challenge. And so all of a sudden you have the ability to design what you want, provision it rapidly, and you can generate it for any test. And the examples on the right-hand side there, whether you can see unit testing, integration, functional, and so forth. So it's a real transformation. And we're so excited at GenRocket. Things really exploded for us in 2020. All of a sudden, the market said, you know what, synthetic data is what we're looking for. And we double as a company in size. We are recognized now as the leader in synthetic data. There are other companies that are good companies, but we technologically are the technology leader, and we're very excited about that. So we have industry-leading data quality. We're ideal for agiles and DevOps. That's pretty much where the whole market is going. We're just entering our 10th year, and most of our customers are very large and dealing with very complex data challenges. And we're proud to have the only patent in the industry. This is for synthetic data generation with referential integrity. Now, in this workshop, in this webinar, we're going to be showing two different demos. We think it's important if you're saying, I don't really know synthetic data, how does it work, to show you. So we're going to give you a first demo to get a sense about that, and then we'll give you a more advanced one, which will really sort of show you the power of, because you saw the title of the webinar, self-service synthetic test data. So first, we're going to start by introducing you to our 5 key components for the first demo, and then we'll transition into the second demo. So the first of the 5 key components, why are we introducing you to these? So you understand how these all work together to solve any test data challenge. It's the domain. It's a noun, person, place, or thing. So you can, I think, organization domain, department domain, user domain. So on the screen, you can see we have a user domain. What are the characteristics of a user domain? We call them attributes. So a name, a password, a phone number, a date of birth, a credit card are all possible attributes of a user. How do we generate the data? We use a generator. And today, we've dramatically expanded. Heisel and I started the company 9+ years ago with 13 generators. Today, we have over 660 generators. Why? Customers needed them. And generators, we have multiple name gen generators, and they have parameters in them that accurately control the data output. So for example, if we want a name, we could have a first name or a last name or a male name or a female name or a middle initial. I think you get the idea. We have 7 different credit card generators. So you choose the generator you want to get exactly the data that you want. We even have an ability to seed the data, S-E-E-D, so you get the exact same data every time you run that scenario. And we'll teach you what a scenario is in a moment. So you've learned about the domain, attribute, and generators. The fourth key component is the receiver. So generating the data that you want, that's handled by the generator, but formatting it, turning it into a usable format, that's the job of the receiver. Now, these days we have 79 different receivers. So just about any use case that the market has brought to GenRocket. So it might be flat or nested XML or JSON, any SQL database, Oracle DB2, NoSQL databases like Mongo, fixed file formats like VSAM and Excel CSV. And then we get into some more advanced use cases. So what if we're not dealing with database data? We're actually trying to simulate data flowing through a system. Maybe there's microservices. So we're talking over a REST API or Socket API or over SOAP. We have the ability to do that at GenRocket, or formats like Notcha for banking or BI2, or a Kafka message or an ISO 22 message, or Swift, Parquet, or Avro. These are some of the new cloud formats, so like Snowflake. We have all different receivers to handle these different data format outputs. So you can see you've learned about the domain attribute generator receiver. And now the fifth and final component is sort of a packaging system. It bundles this up, and we call a scenario because it actually has the potential to produce data. It's an instruction set. So what you're seeing in the big green box here is actually 3 combined scenarios and a concept of 1 scenario per domain. So you can see there are actually 3 chained together scenarios, 1 for organization, 1 for department, and 1 for user. Now this allows us to control how the data is output and always maintaining referential integrity. And of course, with data, that's essential in complex environments. So if we ran this scenario chain, we would get what? 3 organizations, because we have a loop count of 3. We'd get 9 departments, because it's 3 departments per organization. And we get 27,000 users. And notice we can combine multiple receivers in the same scenario chain. So we could output to XML and at the same time, directly insert data into a SQL database. So you've learned about the 5 key components, how we solve any kind of test data challenge, domain, attribute, generator, receiver, and scenario. And by the way, scenario is extremely fast. It can spin up and deliver data to a typical functional test in about 100 milliseconds. Now, Haisel, we always love to talk about our query generators, because when people think about synthetic data, they go, well, what about the fact that I have a real customer number, or in healthcare, an ICD-10 code, a procedure code? Why do we have 17 query generators, Haisel?
So we have 17 different types of query generators because often when you're generating synthetic data, you want to merge that with enumerated data. Enumerated data is data that you already have that exists in maybe a SQL database, a NoSQL database, or spreadsheets, and you want to condition how GenRocket is actually going to generate its data. So one query might say, select a user by their external ID, retrieving their birth date and their salary. And then based on that, you might calculate a new bonus and do that in real time when you're generating the test data.
Awesome. So there's this lovely concept of on-demand real time, and you get synthetic data for security, of course, but also for accuracy. But also when you need real data values, we can query those and blend them in real time. So it's a concept of blended data on demand and in real time. Okay, so we're about to go into the first demo. We want to show you how Haisel will be demonstrating this from his computer. So we have customers with on-premise hosting, very few in fact, because the marketplace has learned that GenRocket is very secure. Of course, synthetic data is secure, and our implementation is also very secure. We do offer dedicated private cloud hosting. Over 90% of customers are in this model, VPC or virtual private cloud. Why? No customer data is stored in the cloud. I'll say that one more time. No customer data is stored in the cloud. What we do is we model a test data project. You'll see Haisel doing that in a moment. And he's going to build out an instruction set. We call it a scenario. That scenario is going to get downloaded to a local machine. This sets in your secure on-prem environment. So the runtime runs on Java. It can run on Windows, Mac, or Linux. This could be your test automation server or an individual tester's machine. And whatever the receiver is supposed to do, you remember that you learned that a moment ago, connecting to a database, perhaps talking over a REST API, that'll all happen within the security of your on-prem environment. Aisel, I'm going to stop sharing, hand it over to you for demo number 1.
Thank you, Garth. Let me know when you can see my screen and I'll continue.
It's right up on the screen.
Okay, so here we are at our virtual private cloud at app.genrocket.com. I'm going to log in, and what you're seeing right now is GenRocket organization. This necessarily be any organization, your organization, a client organization. And now what I'm doing is I'm logging in, and I'm coming to the main dashboard. And what I see is 3 different panes. I'm going to go to the first pane, and I'm going to create a new project. Let's just call it Live Demo. Now, as soon as I do this, what GenRocket does is it creates that project, and it creates the first version of that project so we can do more versioning later on. And now we're presented with a new set of panes. Now, I want to create that very first component we talked about in GenRocket, which is the domain that represents a noun, person, place, or thing. And you can see we have many different ways of importing a domain. I'm going to build one here directly from scratch. And just like we're having this conversation right now, you can imagine yourself being in a room with your engineers and your testers and just thinking about the attributes that you want to cut and paste in. You click the create with generators, and GenRocket goes out to its data warehouse and does its best to assign the appropriate generator to each of those attributes, and you can immediately start previewing what that data is going to look like for this particular domain. I'm going to add a few more attributes. Let's say social SSN. Now, these are United States Social Security numbers, and these are real Social Security numbers. They just happen to be following a pattern. Patterns are actually good in testing as opposed to always having random test data. And I just set my initial pattern for 333. Let's add a few more. I'm going to add card number. Now, it just so happens that GenRocket has 7 different types of credit card numbers, and they generate real credit card numbers using the LUN algorithm. But again, these credit card numbers are 100% secure when you're matching them against other synthetic attributes like first name, last name, and city and state, zip, and things like that. So now you can see how easy it is to go into GenRocket, very easily create a domain, add some attributes, and see that third component being added, which is the generator. Now, as soon as GenRocket creates a domain, it automatically adds an ID attribute. We use this for referential integrity. We can even make that invisible. And it also creates 3 instance variables. That first instance variable is just called the ID variable. What we want to do is use that to set where the initial data value starts to generate from. So the ID, its range generator, start range attribute is already looking at this, and it just so happens that the username, its generator, is already looking at the value that will be created by the ID. So as soon as we hit save, we see immediate patterns start to form. The other one here is the loop count. This instance variable is very important because when we get to that fifth component, which is the scenario, as soon as we say to create a scenario, by default, it looks at the loop count. And right now we're saying we want to generate 10,000 customers. Okay, so this is raw data right now. It has no true shape or form until we get it to that 4th component, which is the receiver. And as Garth mentioned to you, the power of the receiver is that it can morph the data that is being generated into some usable format. And what you're seeing here is many of our different receivers that takes that data and morphs it into some usable format. We're going to go to our common receivers. I'm going to select the XML file receiver. This is going to write XML, flat XML to a file as opposed to nested. Every single receiver has its own set of parameters. Most of them are already set by default, and a receiver will automatically associate itself to the attributes of a domain, and even you can control the sequence of the output of those attributes within a given receiver. So now we've added the first 4 components: the domain, the attribute, the generators, and the receivers, and you can add multiple receivers here at the same time. And now we're going to go to that 5th component, which is a scenario, and what it's going to do is it's going to look at the other 4 components and create a story. And that story is we want to generate 10,000 customers, and right now the icon is the root, because this domain is not currently associated to any other parent-child or sibling relationships with other domains. So now all we have to do is hit the download button. And what GenRocket does, it creates a set of instructions in XML. It encrypts that XML and zips it and downloads it to your local computer. And now once you have downloaded the GenRocket runtime and installed Java on your computer, whether that's Linux, Windows, Unix, Mac, or even some mainframes, then you can go to the command line, where we're going to go now, and you'll see that we've downloaded our scenario here. And I'm just going to type in the command line GenRocket. what you'll see is a plethora of different types of commands that GenRocket can run and use. And we're going to just go to this one right here, which is a small r. So we're going to say GenRocket dash small r, and we're going to tell it to run the customer scenario. So as soon as Java spins up and it loads the GenRocket jars, it starts generating data to that XML file receiver we see right here. And we've generated our 10,000 rows of data. So let's take a look at our results. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so there was the ID attribute where I had given that initial value. Its range generator is simply incrementing by 1. The first name and the last name, they both are using the same generator, which is one of our name gen generators. This particular name gen generator has 1,000 male, 3,000 female, and 10,000 last names for a combination of around 40 million different names. The middle initial is simply using the alphabet gen, letters A through Z. And then you saw we have the user name using the username gen, which is taking the constant user and concatenating with the value that's being generated by the ID. Then you saw me add the social security number, giving it its starting position at 333. We have the credit card generator generating real Visa, MasterCard, and Discover of credit card numbers. The phone number is just generating random phone numbers, and the password is actually the ID again being referenced and being encrypted with an MD5 hash. So even if I go into the 10,000 person here, I know exactly how to log in using that encryption algorithm because I've established a pattern. So these are the 5 key components. Everything else you're going to see is a derivative on top of this. Garth, I'm going to hand it back over to you for summary.
Haisel, thank you so much. So I'm going to share my screen to summarize, and then we're going to move on to demo number 2. So just confirm the generate data for any type of test is up on the screen. Haisel?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or Uzma, if you can confirm. Great.
I can see.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So let's summarize what we just saw. Here's the patented GenRocket engine, spins up in 10 to 50 milliseconds. You saw Haisel building a simple example of a scenario, user scenario. He chose one of our 79 different receivers, the XML file receiver, and that data could have been used for a variety of testing use cases. Now, down the bottom, I want to point out that if you notice, he went to the command line and he typed in GenRocket space dash small r. So he launched that at the command line, but you could have a batch file launch that, a shell script that could launch that. You could launch that also with Jenkins. There's really an infinite way of integrating the data on demand and in real time to a CI/CD pipeline. So of course we work with tools like Selenium. We work with pretty much any commercial testing tool. And we've also been integrated as a data engine with custom testing tools and frameworks. So it's completely versatile how you deploy GenRocket into the different testing environments that you have. Now we want to move on to demo number 2. Now what's the title of the webinar? Self-service synthetic test data automation. So we really want to talk about a layer that customers started coming to us and saying, we really like GenRocket. This is over about 18 months ago, but we want to make it a bit more self-service. So Haisel, being the architect that he is, started inventing a whole self-service layer. And this has been incredibly well received by our customers. They love this functionality. So let's introduce you to the key components here, and then Haisel will show you in action in a banking use case. So the key concepts to know about here are what we would call a test data case. A test data case maps to a test case. So you might have a unit test where I say, I want 100 customers, and that would be an example of a test data case. Or maybe an integration test. I want 5 branches, 10 accounts, and 1,000 customers. Now, against that test data case, in testing, it's always a matter of I want to apply a rule. I want to control that data. Remember, if we're going to a spreadsheet, this is complicated very quickly. And if we're going to production, about half of the time the data doesn't exist. How do I get it in the condition, the variety that Uzma talked about? Well, that's the beauty of the case and the rules, because you can apply a rule against that test data case. So you can say, I want a platinum customer with a starting bank balance of 10,000. No, I want a gold customer with a starting balance of 5,999. You have complete flexibility of having different tested cases and applying different rules. And remember, Haisel talked about the queries. So now I want to go say, if I have a platinum customer, I want to go get that account number for that platinum customer because it matches, it's valid in my system. So we can blend into that test data case the query. Now, packaging wise, we can organize those cases with their rules and queries into stories. Why? Because I might want to run a story with a number of chapters together, and I might even want to roll my stories up into epics. And you can see, of course, we're using some agile terminology here. This is a really powerful set of functionality. Notice it's not a centralized TDM team. This is where a tester themselves can build their own test data cases in that real true self-service sense. So we're now going to go into demonstration number 2. It's a banking use case where Heisel is going to show you our self-service capabilities. Go ahead, Heisel.
Thank you, Kara. Let me know when you can see my ER diagram here.
It is, for me, just coming up on the screen now.
Okay, so what I'm showing you here is an entity relationship diagram of a simple banking database where we have 2 families of tables. The first ones in here in orange are type tables, account type, transaction type, card type, and account level. These are all root tables, and other tables depend on them, many of them here. And then we have our account tables, and our account tables are not only heavily dependent on the type tables, but they're also heavily dependent on each other. So most testers will spend most of their time doing 2-dimensional testing in a spreadsheet because they can test the customer table, the branch, and the account type, and a few others, but it becomes very difficult when you get down to these other tables and all their relationships. So then often the idea is to go to production to try to retrieve this data, and often you're getting more data than you want or less data than you need, and then you still have to go modify that information with spreadsheets. Well, with GenRocket, you can actually extract the entire schema and pull it into our database, our platform. So I'm gonna go here to a new project. We're gonna go to the banking demo project. And here you'll see that we have pulled in those tables. For instance, here's a different structure of a customer domain with many different attributes and having different types of generators other than what we may have had before. And it's a base table and it only has no relationships. But we can go into something like the account table here, and we can see that it has a complexity of relationships. It has a branch as a parent, the account type and account level as siblings, the customer and the customer account and transaction as its children. And then we can even further go down the tree and look at the other information on these and how they're actually formed. So the tester then can spend most of their time in the self-serve part of the platform because they understand what the relationships of their domains are. And here they can spend time with our test cases, our G cases, rules, queries, stories, and epics. I'm going to go into cases here. And what you'll see here is some different types of case suites. A tester can actually go in and create their own test data case suite by just simply giving it a name. I have one up here called banking tables, and that's what I've created. And in there, you can categorize the different types of test cases you want with these many different options. I have 4 different types of test cases here. Unit, 4 different types of categories: unit, negative, load, and integration. Let's take a look at unit. And unit, I want to do some very simple things. Like for account, what I want to do is I want to override the loop count, and I just want to specify the option that I just want to generate 10 accounts. Or I might do something as simple as generating 3 branches. Now, as soon as I set up a test data case, which shows me right down here the instructions that I actually want to use at the command line to run it. I want to run a GenRocket test data case suite, and this is a suite that I can download right here. I'm running under the particular category unit, and I want to run this particular test case, and I can run that on any scenario. We can do that because GenRocket has its own API, and it uses its API to actually go in and search that scenario in around 30 milliseconds and make any changes to it before running the scenario. And if it found the branch in their domain, it would automatically set its loop count to 3. So let's look at something like load. And load, in this situation, what I want to do is I want to set the branch loop count to 1,000, or in this particular test case, I want to set the branch or the customer loop count to 10,000. Let's look at something a little bit more interesting when I want to do a negative test case. As opposed to a happy path, I want to do a negative path. And here, I want to test for a bad social security number, and I want to set the loop count to 100 so I get at least more than 1 negative test. So I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to modify a very particular attribute, specific attribute here, the social security number, and I'm going to use one of GenRocket's key features, which is linked generators. And I'm going to link 4 different generators together. The first one has the real social security numbers. The second one has a list of intrusive characters. The third one is going to replace the dashes with those intrusive characters. And the fourth one says every fourth iteration, I'm actually going to create a negative test. So I don't necessarily want a negative test every single time. I want it on every fourth iteration. And I can even see the summary of that right here as well. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to go to the command line. I'm going to run this. We've attached a different type of receiver this time. Instead of going to XML, we're actually going to populate a database. And I'm going to empty that database right now so we can actually see the customer table here actually has no rows and no data in it. Now, just imagine what it would take for yourself to kind of generate on a spreadsheet 100 rows, having specific information in it so that you can actually perform this test and how long that might take. Let's go in and take a look now and do a refresh here. We actually have 100 rows. And if we look in here, we'll see that every fourth iteration, we actually have a negative test. Now, the cool part about this is because GenRocket can spin that data up very quickly, we can just as easily get rid of that data and it cease to exist. Because when you run a test, you want data to exist. When you're done, you actually don't want that data to exist anymore. So now let's consider that we want to populate all of the type tables. And we want to do that because in order to populate the rest of the tables, we need these set up first. And we want very specific data in each one of the type tables. So I might go back to GenRocket and I'll create a new category called integration. And what I've done here is I've added a test data case that includes 4 things in it. I have the account table, account type, account level, transaction type. Type tables automatically know their loop counts. And now I have the command that I want to run for this particular test data case, which will populate all 4 tables. So we'll go right here and we'll run that. And again, just imagine the time it might take you to populate or create data in spreadsheets or by hand to populate those tables. And the time it took me to say that, I've already populated here. So now I'm getting a very specific information, 100, 101, and 102 for platinum, gold, and silver. I have my account types, checking and saving. I have my card types, Visa, debit, and credit. And then I also have my transaction types. Now that I've done that, I have the ability to easily populate the other tables because I have established full referential integrity. So I might go back over here. And now what I'm going to do is I have 2 different types of cases for populating the other tables, a medium setup and a small setup. The medium here, I got at least 1,000 customer, at least 5 branches and 10 accounts. The small over here, what I'm doing is a much smaller load, 100 customers, 10 accounts with 3 branches. That means I'm guaranteed to get 30 customer accounts, 30 card products, and 30 transactions just based on referential integrity. I also want to use one of our other self-serve features, which is test data rules. And in that test data rule, I want to add a new rule that will help me determine what my account balances will be on each account. So I'm just going to zoom in here real quick and we can look that we can very easily create our own rule set. And we can see even the summary of that, of what I've already done here and its complexities. And these can be as complex as you want, but you get to break your rules down into simple concerns. And what I've done here for this first rule is I'm going in and I'm saying the conditions, I want the account domain, the account level to equal 100. And then I can do compounds. Then basically what I wanted to do, its action is I wanted to use the random money gen and I set the amount between $10,000 and $20,000. So what I've done here is I set up all of my rules for the different ranges that I want. And the beautiful part is I can add this rule and many other rules to a particular test case all at the same time. Again, we're just going to go directly here to the command line and we're going to run the small setup to populate the other tables. That's right here. Now just imagine what this would take. Even you would stop at spreadsheets, and this is where you might have to go to production data and things like that in order to get this data. And this is normally when testing fails or people stop testing because of the level of complexity they have to go through to build all that data. And here we've established our 3 branches. And we go to the accounts, we'll see, let me move this over here. We'll see that we have created 10 accounts for each branch. And if we look at the account levels here, 100, 101, and 102, platinum, gold, and silver, we're seeing that we're actually getting the test data rules to meet us with the ranges of the money that we wanted in those accounts, those account balances. And if we go to the card products here, we'll see that we have 30 card products, 30 customer accounts and 30 transactions. Now I can again just go as fast as I want and I can delete all of that information and it doesn't exist anymore. And let's say I want to go back now and I want to generate my data for the medium accounts. So I've deleted everything out of that entire database. And now what I'm doing is I'm going back in, and this time I'm again building up the type tables, and I'm also now populating the account tables with new information and more information for the medium load. So if we go back here, we'll see, if we look at the, for instance, the branch, instead of having 3 branches, we now have 5 branches. We now have 50 accounts. If we look at the customers, we have over 1,000 customers. If we go down to something like the transactions, we have over 150 transactions, all with full referential integrity. Now, lastly, let's think about if you had a group of teams working on a large database with different families, all creating their test data cases and things like that. You're dividing and conquering, and that way you're testing an entire system at the same time. Then I might want to come back over to GenRocket and start to package my different test data cases, in which case I might move those into stories. So for instance, populating the type tables, we can see in one line of command here, what I've done is I've pulled the type tables, the account level, account type, card type, and transactions into one story. I've even specified each of them have their own different test data, sorry, let me go back here. They have their own scenario and their own test data case of each one of these. I've also gone and I've packaged up my medium and small populations so I can run those as well. And then what I might want to do is move further up into epics, where I can further take my stories and package those. So for populating the small, now I've moved the type table story up in here and the small population story up in here into an epic. And now I have the medium one up in here, and I have a one-line command. So you can imagine if we had different teams and different stories, we might have 5 or 10 or 20 different stories here, and we could literally populate an entire database in one line of code. Okay, so now I've just given you a kind of summary of the derivatives that sit on top of our 5 key components, our self-serve platform. I'm going to hand it back over to Garth to do a summary. Thank you, Garth.
Awesome. Hi, Phil. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're just going to summarize here and sharing my desktop. And so we'll sort of pull it all together for you. So if you look at the solution architecture, we talked before about a cloud piece and on-prem piece. In the cloud, you're building those different test data projects. We have 10 different ways to set up those projects. The most popular is XTS, or extract table schema, where we can quickly put in look at the metadata, not the actual data, the metadata, and set up a project. And associated with that particular project, there'll be the base scenarios, and then the self-service you just learned about from Heisel's demo. We can apply different test data cases and rules queries and roll those up into stories and epics. You heard before that we have over 650 generators as of today, 660, and 70 plus receivers as of today, 79 receivers for any data format. Now these sync with a new component from GenRocket called the G repository server. So imagine having literally hundreds or thousands of different test data cases and rules and queries, and this is changing because your data models are changing. How do we handle that? We automatically sync this over to the repository server. So now you've got your tester, whether they're using the runtime or our multi-user server, they're leveraging the different cases with the rules and queries, and automatically, as they're running them, using the latest version and syncing right into your pipeline, so that when your CI/CD pipeline's running and a test case calls for test data, remember that GenRocket-r, it literally runs, and in a few milliseconds, the data is provided into a database or over an API, wherever the data is needed. So that's that beautiful solution architecture that Heisel invented and is being deployed now by all of our customers. So just emphasizing how this is designed for Agile. Imagine a typical Agile epic. Perhaps you're in insurance, and you might say, as an agent, I wish to generate a quote so I can add a new customer. So what do you have to do for that quote? You have to be able to create an agent, create a customer, create the quote, make the payment, create a policy, these Agile stories. How do we do that in GenRocket? So the methodology, there are 4 parts of our methodology: model, design, deploy, and manage. Well, in the modeling area, I touched on that a moment ago. You can model any sort of test data project, 10 ways to set that up. You can pull in any data model, whatever that, regardless of complexity, and always managing referential integrity. Then the design phase. This is that self-service piece that Heisel just talked about. Any data variation. Remember, you go to production, There are going to be some valid use cases there, but what about the negative use cases? What about unique data? What about permutations and combinations? So those aren't available in production. And what do we typically do in testing? We go back to a spreadsheet and create it by hand, which is manual. So the beauty of this methodology, it's automated, it's self-service, and you can get any data variation that you want. And of course, for validity, we can have blended production data. And then you start thinking about those volume use cases where you're doing load and performance testing, and you just change the loop count and you can crank up the volume very, very easily. So that's the design phase. Then you go to the deployment phase. You learned about our receivers. Any output format, 79. By the way, we add new receivers in 2 to 3 weeks for customers. So just about any requirement is addressed by the platform. We can integrate with any framework. You heard about that before. And of course, that automated execution, because literally when the test case calls the data, GenRocket-R through a batch file shell script through Jenkins, the data spins up and is delivered very, very quickly into the test case. And lastly, management. So GenRocket has, of course, single sign-on. You have different team permissions for different projects. There's full lifecycle management. And we have a whole analytics and reporting layer, so you can see what's going on across your different projects. Last thing I wanted to bring up before we open it up for question and answer is just talking about, because this webinar is about self-service, the difference in our view between distributed self-service and centralized self-service. So if you look at the traditional TDM model, test data management model, you have a TDM team, and they've got a portal, and they're creating test data sets, if you will, and provisioning those, and then QA teams are going and grabbing those data sets. The problem starts when the testing team doesn't have what they want. Now they drop back down to spreadsheets, and this can be quite time-consuming. One of our customers to do this has a 15-person team. Think of the cost of 15 headcount, and the average cycle using traditional TDM tools, this particular vendor tool, is 30 days, if you think about the refresh cycle and everything else. Now you go to the distributed self-service model with GenRocket. That same entity, that same organization has brought in GenRocket, and they're provisioning an equivalent amount of data with 2 resources, 15 resources, 2 resources, and the testing team is able to do it themselves same day or up to a few days. So it's dramatically faster. It's much more ease of use. They have a lot of automations. And I think Heisel started to show you all the graphics that starts to allow a tester to start to see the data relationships as well. So we're really emphasizing the difference between centralized self-service and distributed self-service. Now, Uzma, I know we wanted to wrap up the webinar and then open it up for questions. And would you like to cover this slide for us?
Yes, so let me pull up my slides.
Would you like to share yours?
Yes. So
Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Heisel and Garth, for this insightful session and demo on the self-service synthetic test data automation using GenRocket. I mean, this is really, really important and helpful, because working with numerous clients, the pain that I have felt and I've seen the testers and the product teams facing alike is because when you go to a product team, they are very interested in getting almost all the scenarios covered during the testing, various testing cycles. And even with the traditional way of generating test data, even when it provides us some coverage, it does not provide substantial or enough coverage for them to be sure that while their product will go to production, it will meet and it will all the client requirements and will run all operations successfully as intended without any failure. With this new approach, and one thing that I feel during this session and looking at how GenRocket is working and considering how some other test data generation and automation tools in the industry right now, the options and features that they are providing, this is much simpler, faster, and very easily maintainable. I mean, I could be biased, but this is what I felt while working with GenRocket, and this is while working with some of our clients where it has been a huge help. So what I wanna ask the participants right now is, once again, thank you for your participation. I hope this information and this session has provided you something to think about, something to learn and explore. But we understand that 1 hour may not be enough for a tool like this, and you may have a lot of questions. You may want to go back and learn more. So here are few options that you can choose from. You can request design and deployment guides for GenRocket. And if you want an expert opinion, you could reach out to us. You can reach out to me at usma.yasin@qualitatum.com. The email address is written right below on the slide. You can note this down. We will be sending out an email with our the video link for you to go back and refer to the whole session, and you may have more questions then, and it will have my email address as well, so you can reach out to me at any time. With this expert session, we can help you discover your needs regarding the test data and provide you a POC just to show you that how it works and how it can help your organization. Once again, thank you so much for joining in. So I'm going to open it up for the question answers. Garth, are you going to take it up from here? I'll start by asking the first question, if you don't mind.
So Uzma, I noticed we have a question from Fahad. May I relay that to Haisel?
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Okay, well, lovely. So Haisel, Fahad is asking, can we generate test data for business users, for example, a treasury user? So you think of a financial use case, a treasury user who needs to test a new functionality. So he's talking greenfield, something brand new. So there's no production data for interest rate swaps.
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely yes. GenRocket is designed to basically allow you to test anything. And the longer answer is you might use our calculation generators to create the calculations that you want to calculate your interest rates. The idea of using future data is actually how I built GenRocket, because when I was doing startups, I actually didn't even have test data. And sometimes I needed to create test data that populated systems 10 years in advance. So with our flexible date range gens and our calculation different types of generators, you could absolutely generate any type of data you want. And in fact, if you have some very specific types of industry type calculators, then you would contact GenRocket and we actually might create new generators based on those algorithms and even give you honorable mention when we document the fact that we created a new generator based on your request.
Lovely, Haisel. And I just want to remind the attendees, so down on the bottom of the tray there, you can see there's a button or a tab called Q&A. And so feel free to just type in your question right there. And we have the expert here in Haisel Taylor. Again, Haisel, kind of an interesting story, isn't it, Haisel, where I met Haisel about 11 years ago, and he had been prototyping and working on GenRocket for about 10 years. So this has been a real passion project for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't do it because I wanted to. I did it because I had to.
So Fahad has come back with another question, and I want to invite the attendees, any question you'd like to ask, but we'll go to Fahad's question. And again, right in that Q&A section at the bottom, he asked, Haisel, can we add attributes according to our requirements to generate the data?
So if you're talking about dynamically adding attributes to a domain after that domain has been created, the answer is also yes. You could use our GenRocket API, and we actually have some organizations that use our GenRocket API to create electronic testers, in which case an electronic tester using the scripting language might run a scenario, look at the results by doing assertions on what took place in the database, make new decisions, modify a scenario, which in case it might add an attribute or delete an attribute, change the format of a domain, modify it to generators, and do that in around 30 milliseconds, and then launch the scenario again. So again, you have complete autonomy to think outside the box and types of generation scenarios that you want.
Yeah, if I can talk from sort of the marketplace, what we see, and Uzma, you may have seen this with GenRocket as well, we'll find a customer will have a particular difficult test data challenge. They'll bring that to GenRocket. We'll do a proof of concept to validate it. They'll start there, and then it sort of unfolds where they start to go, oh, we can use it here, we can use it here, we can use it here. And the expansion goes like this in terms of use cases. And then that light bulb goes off a little later on. It's not usually day one, around the API that Haisel just talked about, of being able to create that electronic tester. So that the platform components are there to handle any test data challenge. It's just a matter of, by the way, our knowledge base has over 1,000 help articles. So we provide a customer success manager. We work with our partners, of course, Kualitatem, to be able to provide that knowledge transfer as well. But there's a whole, the point is that there's the platform and the knowledge to be able to solve your test data challenges. Fahad asked Haisel, can you unmute me so I can ask a question verbally? Aha, well, let me try that, Fahad. That's a great question. So let me see, Fahad, I'm just looking. Where is Fahad on the list? You able to see him, Uzma?
No, so for some reason, I don't see the.
I've just enabled that, Garth.
Great.
Okay, wonderful. Go ahead, Fahad.
Yes, hi Garth, hi Haisel. Okay,
Hello.
so I wanted to ask that the test data that we are generating with this synthetic data, so there are two options probably that I understand. One option is that you can directly push that test data into the database of the system that I am using or if a client is using. Second option would be we can generate that data in form of Excel, because actually I work as a senior business consultant and we provide consultancy services to banks. So I work as a Temenos T24 certified partner company by the name of NDC.
So the short, I'm sorry.
Yes, Haisel, you continue.
Sure. So the short answer is yes. The larger answer is that we just gave you examples where we were just happen to be populating a database, and I happen to be writing out the XML through our different receivers. We currently have 79 different types of receivers. So some people actually use GenRocket to do real-time test data generation over web services, REST or SOAP. They can write out the delimited files, XML files, nested, JSON, Avro, Parquet, the list goes on. And we even have bulk load receivers. We have some people who use our partition engine to run GenRocket across multiple instances, across multiple servers to generate millions of rows of data per second, so they can generate hundreds to billions of rows of data, and that goes into flat files, which then gets bulk loaded directly into databases. So the key to the 5 key components is that the fourth component allows us to think way outside the box of any type of data we want to generate. We even have generators that generate actual SQL statements to create databases from scratch, looking at the metadata. So again, this depends on what your test data challenge is. This is where customers get to work with us directly to think outside the box on what their challenges is that we need to solve.
Okay, all right. And this, because basically what we do is that we ultimately ask the clients to provide the user test cases. So whatever development that we are doing or whatever system that we are providing to them, we can do our internal sanity based on the test cases that client provides to us.
Sure. That's
right.
great.
So in that, so they can provide us with multiple iterations that we can perform in the system manually, because the data, it's not just the data. Obviously, we are checking the validations and the outputs that are appearing after we input that data. So they can provide us in a CSV or an Excel format, and then we can input that data into the system to do the testing, right? Because
well, so this is
time with the client.
Well, so now again, you're still thinking technically right now in 2 dimensions, where information is coming to you in spreadsheets and so forth. And here's where you can say to the customer, we can think a little bit higher level than that using our test data cases, rules, and queries, where GenRocket looks at the dimensions of our table as in dimensions and allows us to build much more complex test data. And we can create the test data cases. We might even use GenRocket's permutation generators to create all possible permutations of the many different ways that that test data might need to be looked at, in which case it's really easy to do that in GenRocket. And GenRocket will say, out of these 10 different attributes and these 100 different enumerators, I'm going to generate 250,000 different permutations. I mean, it just depends on what you want. But again, now you can actually go to the customer and say, we can actually test faster and better for you because GenRocket thinks further ahead, and you don't have to think in terms of spreadsheet, you think in terms of test data cases, rules and queries, and then we can send that data directly to where you want. It doesn't have to go into a spreadsheet. It could go directly into a database. It could produce a different type of document, an EDI document, or anything that you want in real time. Just a complete shift in the way you're thinking about testing.
I understand your point, and that's a very valid point. If someone has to provide a synthetic, for example, if we talk about banks, they might not be able to provide their existing production data to us. So they need to provide a synthetic data. I was basically talking from the testing point of view because we're not just testing the data, we are testing the validations that we are using in the core banking system that we are providing.
Mm-hmm.
So any user who is inputting a transaction or who is inputting a data, there are certain validations that are available in the front end of the system, which can only be tested when you input the information firsthand from the front end of the system.
So
in
if you want to,
this specific case, yes,
right.
I salute that.
Yeah, if you want to do black box testing from the front end, you can, but in true of testing technology, black box testing is only for testing the functionality of the pages on the front end and not the functionality on the back end. If that's the only way you can do it, sure. But that's the reason why there's more than $1 trillion worth of bugs and that have to be fixed in production, because only 20% of the code is actually tested from the front end. Whereas if you go directly to the web services, controllers, store procedures, and so forth, you get to test almost 98% of the code. So it's still a concept of shift and changing that you have to understand the power that you get with GenRocket to thoroughly test the full platform.
Hi, Sil,
and I was just going to say, Uzma, it's time now. We need to wrap up. Was that what you're going to do, Uzma?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So
okay, sure.
I was just gonna add to what Haisel has just said. Yes, in the traditional way of testing, we still do a lot of black box testing using the front end or the user interface of the product. But with GenRocket, we have had the cases where we have automated the complete cycle using test data automation scripts and using and inputting that data through the front end and testing various validations and permutations that are required to be tested. And I'm talking about solutions and products in the banking industry that where we have found this to be very applicable and very useful. So yes, as Haisel said, this is not just a technology shift or methodology shift, this is a mindset shift as well. Because as we moved from waterfall to agile, and now we are moving towards and within agile, we're moving towards the continuous testing era. So it has become very important that we automate the whole cycle and keep running it without any interruptions, just to make sure that we are gaining speed for our releases and our production for the products. So yeah, I mean, still, even if you want to do it the traditional way and testing via front end, that is also possible. However, not too efficient, I mean, in my personal opinion, but still there's a solution for that.
Yeah, excellent questions, Fahad.
Yeah, and let's Uzma, let's wrap up, and I think it'd be good to share just in terms of requested calls to action. So if I may just remind everybody, and I think you had that slide there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll stop sharing, and you can share yours if you'd like to, Uzma.
Okay. All right. So just quickly going back, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And there were some very good questions that you asked, and we know that we have sparked this interest, and we have put this thought in the minds of the people who are actually more relevant to this industry in this field. And you will have more questions, I'm pretty sure. So feel free to reach out to me at uzma.yasin@qualitatum.com at any point in time. You can also write to partnerships@qualitatum.com, and we would respond back to you. For any GenRocket self-service synthetic test data automation material and guides. You can request those by visiting genrocket.com. And there's a lot of helpful material already posted over there and available to anybody who's interested in learning more about this area and how it is providing more speed and efficiency to the traditional way of test data management. Also, I'm inviting you to any one-on-one, very exclusive session with you and your team to explore your needs regarding test data and do a proof of concept by taking out one use case or a couple of use cases just to see that how it will help your organization. So yeah, it's Garth, over to you if you want to end this up.
No, I just want to thank Uzma, thank you, thank Faisal Taylor, and the attendees for spending their time with us to learn more about self-service synthetic test data automation. I want to wish everybody a great evening or day, depending on the time zone they're in. Thanks, Uzma.
Thank you, Faisal. Thank you, Garth. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Great session. Have a good one.
You're welcome.